So another scenario that we go through with rescuing dogs, again, this applies to any dogs, is if they're dashing for the door, they're pulling on their leash, they're not coming when they're called, they probably
Mhm.
don't know their name. Like my last one, wasn't familiar with his name.
Oh, yeah.
What's your tips for that?
So my tips are to establish some kind of self-control for the dog. So teaching him to control himself in all scenarios. So make him work for everything he gets. Make him sit before he goes out the door, make him sit for his food, make him sit to be leashed. All of that will teach the dog that he can't just jump around and be crazy. He has to be
Mm,
calm before he can get what he wants. So for dogs who like to rush out the front door, I say teach them to sit at the front door, and then when you open the door, if they start to get up, then shut the door. And as long as they're sitting, the door opens. If they pop up, the door closes. And they learn very quickly that in order to get the door to open to go out, they have to sit. And so it teaches them to control themselves at the door. And you always want to keep them on a leash when you're practicing this. You don't want to set them up to run off when you're in the middle of training. um, so that's a huge one for dashing away at the door. Now, once you get out on the walk, if they're pulling on the leash, you
mhm.
can do a couple of things. One is that once you feel that tension on the leash, to stop, call your dog back to you, and once they're slack in the leash again, keep walking. For some dogs that works. For some, they just will pull like a freight train anyway. They don't care. So in that case, I say, when your dog pulls, say, "Oh, come on, puppy, let's go this way." Turn around and then just go the opposite direction. So every time they pull in one direction, you call them to go the other direction. And then they start to not know which way you're going to go. So they learn to look to you instead of just pulling ahead. So
Mm,
that's a good one. And keep in mind too, when you're walking your dog, you may walk in a circle of just 10 feet for an hour. It doesn't matter because you still just walked your dog for an hour.
right,
So
right.
during the training phase, don't worry so much about how far you go as to how much you're doing.
That makes complete sense. But what if it's the scenario where, and I've had this one time where the dog, I had to pull the leash because he wasn't, he wasn't walking.
Hmm. So he doesn't want to walk,
He's just sniff,
and
sniff, sniff, and it's just, we're not
uh,
going anywhere.
okay. So if it's a case of a dog who is just wanting to sniff, and maybe it's a big dog who just knows you can't pull him, you have to take some high value treats with you, something exciting like chicken or turkey or something like that, and kind of coax them along with you and teach them to follow you for the treats. And the best thing to do is start in your house without the leash, because then it teaches you how to guide the dog without using the leash.
Right.
And it also teaches him to kind of follow you. So that's a great thing. Also, working on eye contact from the dog. So if you are working on a sit, take the treat and put it right up here so he has to look into your eyes and then give him the treat. And so that focus, when you get out into the real world, if he already knows it in the house, he's more likely to look at you when you ask for attention. And so the more you can tune the dog into you as the handler, the more he'll do that outside also, instead of sniffing, instead of pulling, things like that. And the last thing for the leash pulling is just maybe change the equipment. So if you have your dog on a harness that clips where the leash clips on the back of the dog,
Yes.
that will give your dog the momentum to use his whole body weight to pull on the leash. They make front clipping harnesses where it clips under the chin at the chest,
Right.
and that actually prevents them from being able to pull. So changing to a piece of equipment that helps with the pulling is also good.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah. Oh, coming when called. That's a big one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of okay, this one I'm gonna have to bring up the rescue dogs because a lot of them have been bounced around from home to home, so they haven't
Mhm.
really attached themselves to a particular name because maybe it was changed every time they were bounced around.
Yeah.
How do you address that?
Yeah. So I think a great thing for taking in a dog who's had multiple homes is to, when you feed the dog his meals, hand feed him. So feed him from your hand. And that really helps strengthen the bond and it teaches the dog to trust you even faster. So
Mm,
that's a good foundation for a lot of things, but especially when you want the dog to come to you, then he already knows you give good things, so he's more likely to come. So that's a good one. And then when you're just in your house, if you see the dog across the room, just start calling him. But you have to be very exciting so he wants to come to you. Like, puppy, come here, puppy. Yay, I'm over here. And then always making it positive. So even if he just did something that was really frustrating to you, maybe he bolted out the front door and you called him and he came back, your heart is racing, you're angry, you're upset, you're scared, but you have to make him think that was the best thing that ever happened, that he came back to you.
party
So no,
time.
yeah. And so you have to put all your emotions aside and think that when he comes to you, it's always positive. So
Got
you
you.
can practice outside if you've got a long leash. They make leashes from 15 up to 100 feet, and you can put him on one of those, call him to you from across the yard. If he doesn't come, you just do a gentle tug on the leash and kind of reel him in towards you. And even him coming to you that way is rewarding because he still did it, even though you kind of had to coax him to do it. He still gets a reward for doing it.
Mm.
Yeah, and I like to use high value food for that recall, teaching him to come.
Oh boy, the steak. That's high value
Steak.
food for me.
Yep. That's right.
Great.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. So the recall is very important. That's the first thing I tell people to work on is just teach your dog that coming to you is a good thing.
Okay. Thank you for
Right?
those tips.
You're welcome.